What's going on, y'all? Episode 6, Season 2, Let's Be Real podcast, man. We're back. I know we missed a week, but look, we're back. We're going to go over all the games from last week. We're going to touch on some games this week. We're going to give our top five. Now they're about a third of the way through the season. Get the top five that we got. And then we're going to add a new little wrinkle here at the end, too, that we'll get to. But, look, don't matter what kind of new things we add, we always going to stick with some of the good things. And that's the first thing we always start with, and that's the wine, man. So today I have a Cabernet from Napa called Iter. Really good, actually. Really inexpensive Napa Cab, about $20. Little peppery at the beginning, but a lot of fruit, a lot of dark fruits, a lot of like blackberry. Really good. Like this is gonna be what I'm drinking watching the game tonight. We are filming Thursday, so that's gonna be my Thursday night wine sipper that I'm gonna be watching the game with. But look, man, let's get to it. We got a lot to get to, not a lot of time. So we're gonna start off, man, with the recap from Week 6, and we're gonna start off with that Thursday night game, y'all. Not a good game for me and some friends, but that's what we got to start with. And so Thursday night, man, we got the Eagles taking the L to the Giants, 34-17. And so, I mean, look, I'm glad we starting with this because we gonna go into this a little bit. Obviously, you know, still 4-2, not the end of the world, but to get absolutely run through by a Giants team that this year is, essentially just asking to give teams wins. It's unacceptable, man. And the way the offense has looked, it's again, man. It's we talk about it. It seems like every week with the Eagles, man. It's just cannot play a complete game. It's either up 14, decide that we're going to run the ball twice the whole second half. Negative yards passing for an entire half. Just again, it's just a continuance of just the weird things, man. And watching it, one of the things that I said to one of my friends who also is an Eagles fan is when you watch that game, in a game that featured Jalen Hurts, um, say Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, Devontae, whoever you want to name on the Eagles, a game that featured all these star players. The two best football players on the field were Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterboo. And that is embarrassing if you're an Eagles player. Um, Look, it essentially, man. Giants came out, they punched him in the mouth. The Eagles had nothing for him. It is what it is at this point. What I will say is, it's not time to full blown sound the alarms, but it is panic time. One of the reasons a report did come out this week. One of the players, active player with the Eagles right now, came out and said that this feels a lot like 2023. That is something I've been saying all year. It's what it looks like. And for all of y'all who don't remember 2023, Eagles got a bunch of wins, looking really ugly. Sounds a lot like this year. And then kind of, dropped some that they should have had. Sounds like this year. And then walked into a playoff game. I believe it was against the Bucks. And in that playoff game, looked like they were more interested in getting to the end of the game so they could head home and get their vacation started than playing football the entire game. And they got blown out in one of the most embarrassing losses of a playoff game by a good to great team that there is. So, you put all that together, and look, a lot of blame to go around. Obviously, Jalen got to play better. Saquon got to play better. Um, AJ got to play better. Defense has to be better. It's not what it was last year. And so a lot of blame to go around. But what I will say is this starts at the top. And this is a head coaching problem. And I know, look, y'all already know I'm not a Sirianni guy, but this is I got somebody in my life, Eagles fan, who is a Sirianni supporter. I don't, we'll say that. This is the question I posed to him. So first of all, I'm going to lay this out, right? So typically with a head coach, just in general in the NFL, right? You have an offensive head coach, usually the play caller. If he's not the play caller, he has the OC who's the play caller. You have your DC. If you're a defensive coach, call it defense, or you have your DC, whatever it is, right? But if you are the head coach and you are not calling your side of the ball, you have two responsibilities at that point. One, you hire your OC. Two, you got to create a culture. And so, when obviously Sirianni doesn't call the offensive head coach doesn't call the defense. So let's just look at his track record of those two responsibilities that a head coach should have when they are not the play caller for their side of the ball. Hiring the guy on their side of the ball. 0 for 2. So 2 years ago, offense was not great. Fired the OC. Howie went out and found Kellen Moore, brought in a real OC. Last year looked really good. This year, Kellen Moore leaves. Sirianni hires his OC. I get it. You want to look. I don't care that you want to keep it in building. I get it. Still doesn't change the fact that two hires, 0 for 2. So doesn't do that well. Next, culture. Well, let's really look at the culture. Over the last 3 years, each year we've heard of turmoil in the locker room, stories getting out of the locker room. Again, we can kind of go back through the immaturity issues of the head coach himself, but setting a culture in which every year there's problems in the locker room and stories getting out of the locker room, that doesn't sound like a good culture to me. So the question I pose is, if you defend Sirianni, what does he do well? Because I don't know. Now you can say, oh, he wins. He wins. What I will tell you, every game that I watch the Eagles or every story that I hear come out of the locker room or whatever it is makes me more impressed with the roster that Howie's been able to put together. Because it seems like I have to give the head coaching less and less credit and give the roster construction more and more credit. And also, going back to Howie, the coordinator hires more credit. Because at this point, it seems like you could put a toddler as the head coach and it would be going just as well. So again, I don't know what he does well. I don't know if anybody can tell me what he does well. But what I can tell you is what I know he for sure does not do well is the things that you need a head coach to do well. Especially a head coach that is not the play caller. If let's say, for instance, Sean McVay, let's say he had a terrible culture. he at least brings value in his play calling and his offense. Now, look, Sean McVay is also established as one of the best coaches in the NFL, and you never hear anything come out of that locker room. But if by chance, let's say the culture was terrible, the value he brings is still being an elite offensive mind. What value is Sirianni bringing? And look, this is not just an NFL thing. This is an everywhere thing. If you're not bringing value, why are you there? So, look, I think he should be on the hot seat. I think how he's shown in the past, he does not have a problem with putting head coaches on the hot seat a little more quickly than you would see other teams do that. I don't think Sirianni is there yet. But again, I think, we'll see what happens this week. I think if me personally, I don't see the value there. Again, I would have fired him. I don't even know how many times up until this point, but yeah. Look, we're going to stay in the NFC East, man. Look, Cowboys, we're going over to Cowboys, losing to Carolina, 30-27. Look, man, here's what I'll say. I don't know if Micah would help their run defense. But I don't know how much worse that run defense could get even without Micah there. And so, shout out to Jerry. That defense, he said this was a win now move. That defense, pretty sure it's 32nd, 31st, or 30th in every single category. So, when Rico Dowdle comes to town and tells you the week before that you better strap up, and then he comes to town and runs all over you, that's a little rough. And so, look, but if you're a Cowboys fan, good news. According to Jerry, you guys are in it. You guys are going for it. And you might be in the market for a pass rusher. I would say I don't think Micah Parsons is available. But, man, could you imagine if you get a pass rusher like that in your building? Now, obviously, I'm joking. I always like to take shots, Cowboys expense. But, look, again, it goes back to, man, if you're a Cowboys fan, it's got to be very frustrating, right? Jerry, the whole kind of validation of him trading away Micah was, well, look at him against the run. And Rico Dowdle, a guy who wasn't good enough to be on your team this year as a running back, has, career day against you. And, offense puts up 27. I mean, again, we know what it is with the defense, man. You're going to have to put up 30. 27, it's not a bad game. Still don't have CD out there, so obviously, still kind of playing a little shorthanded on the offense. But look, it's what it is. I think it's even more telling that Jerry still thinks you're in it and that he's willing to go out and spend draft capital in areas that need improvement, one of those being pass rushing, when he gave away a generational pass rusher. So, look, to me, man, it's hard for me to take the Cowboys serious just because, granted, that offense, it can come out and they're a team that can come out and score enough to beat anybody. But the defense is a team that the defense can give up enough points that you can lose to anybody. And now it's a dangerous team. I don't see them making the playoffs, anything like that. But it's fun. They're fun to watch. And you're going to see points when you watch them. So, But yeah, if I was a Cowboys fan, again, it almost gets more and more frustrating as the weeks go by, because it's not even that, you can't get to the quarterback, it's that you can't stop the run either, and that was the whole reason to get rid of Micah Parsons. And look, man, lastly, we're gonna stick with the NFC East and finish up the NFC East here with the Commanders. So Commanders falling to the Bears 25-24. And look, I think this was, with the Commanders, I think this was a little foreseeable. I didn't think obviously not coming back this much, but you've been dealing with injuries to Jaden Daniels. But what I would say is, when you play so many one-score games, and look, you're seeing it with the Chiefs, who arguably the greatest team we've seen, not even, I don't think it's the greatest team we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years. Last year, with all these one-score wins, not losing, and then start of this season, all these one-score games that they are losing, seeing that same thing with the Commanders. And look, we'll have to see. Jaden had some problems holding on to the ball, took some shots. I don't love seeing that, especially being that he's my starting quarterback in fantasy. But in all seriousness, look, they're a team obviously still dangerous, still very much alive. But that NFC, man, it's tough. A lot of good middle of the road to good teams in the NFC. And the Commanders got to start stringing together some wins, because they could find themselves on the outside of the playoffs or down in that wild card spot looking up. And again, just not a place you want to be, especially with the NFC looking the way it does this year. And on the flip side, man, look, I think this game, the Bears beating the Commanders, you get a little bit of that vindication from, kind of the loss that the Commanders took and kind of propelled them into the rest of their year last year. But the loss that kind of spiraled the Bears out of control with that Hail Mary game. And I think this game, what it really shows is the validation of the coaching hire of Ben Johnson. And not because, look, I thought I liked Ben Johnson a lot. I think he's a great offensive coach, brings a lot of creativity. But what we saw in this game was a little bit of what we saw with, or not a little bit, is what we saw with the Lions, right? Where they came out to prove a point running the football, and that's exactly what they did. And they came into that game being one of the worst teams in the league rushing the ball, and I think they a yard or a yard and a half more per carry in that game. And again, it's very reminiscent of Ben Johnson getting back to what we saw in Detroit, with leading with the rushing attack. And so I think when you watch a coach who goes into a bye week saying, okay, here's our issues, here's where we need to get better, and this is what we're going to put an emphasis on, they come out and they execute that well. I think, all the creativity, all that, he's going to have that. But to be able to go into a week where you say, okay, whatever weakness we have coming into this week, we know that we have a guy who can put a game plan together that we can execute and excel in one of the areas we're weakest in. That is a huge, huge win for the Bears. Huge win for Caleb. Huge win for Bears fans. And like I said, I think it just really solidifies that Ben Johnson hire. And I think, again, we'll have to see kind of how they go. But again, could be a win that kind of starts snowballing them now, 3-2 now, able to maybe start getting some momentum. And look, I have them as a playoff team. I think this could be kind of the start of them moving into that playoff kind of contending team. Next, man, look, let's go. We're going to go Bucks and 49ers. And look, man, no fourth quarter heroics, comebacks needed from Baker this week. They went out, put it on them. And man, look, again, it's just Baker, clearly the MVP of the league right now, man. What he's doing, you have Emeka Ibuka go out early in that game, and he's throwing to guys who literally two guys had their very first ever NFL touchdown. You know, throwing to fourth and fifth string wide receivers is your 1 and 2 option, and dealing. And so, look, the Bucks, man. Again, it's one of the reasons I had them as one of my Super Bowl picks. Is I thought that offense with the weapons and Baker could be elite. And now what we're seeing is Baker, even without those weapons, can be elite and find ways to win, which just makes them so much scarier when he does get Mike Evans back. He does get Chris Godwin back. He does get Ibuka back. He does get his full offensive line back. And defense gets healthier. It's just, again, they're shaping to be, again, kind of what I thought, number 1 seed in the NFC and Super Bowl contender. And the other side, man, look, 49ers, it seems like it's every year they are, you come in with this hype, and this year, especially with, okay, we got everybody healthy. We have the easiest schedule in the league, and injuries, man. And it's just injuries with them every year. And so now I think, obviously, Fred Warner going out, obviously just sucks for him. Great player, Hall of Fame caliber player. But I think this is going to be the nail in the 49ers coffin. I think there's only so much you can do to squeeze out just all the juice from the players you have. And Fred Warner, I mean, at this point, man, may have been the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year, or one of the top guys for Defensive Player of the Year, the way he was playing. So to lose him, already out Bosa, in a wide receiver core banged up all year, Purdy hurt. Look, Mac Jones looked like you found, another Brock Purdy-esque quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo-esque quarterback who very limited, but somehow he gets in Kyle Shanahan's offense and looks amazing. Maybe Mac will get a $50+ million contract out of this. Oh, yeah. That's right. Like I told y'all, Brock Purdy, that contract, didn't like it at the time. And again, it feels like every time Brock Purdy goes out, we're just gifted seeing exactly why he looked so good in the Shanahan offense and why every quarterback looks good in the Shanahan offense. And look, it's the unfortunate nature of it now. You paid your quarterback, and now you're hurt. It's just not a lot of ways I can see the Niners coming through this as a legitimate contending team. And the NFC West is so loaded right now. It looks like it would not shock me to see them, even with the easiest schedule in the league, end up in third place in that division. Next up, man, we're going to talk about the Dolphins. So Dolphins and Chargers. Dolphins find a way to lose again, just doing Dolphins things. It seemed like, the Dolphins and Chargers getting together is just a tough one because neither team wants to win the game, it seems like, but somebody's got to. And so it looks like Miami just out Miami'd the Chargers chargering. But look, man, Chargers escaping Miami. And look, I think I said this last episode. Yeah, they started off hot. They started off great. But we see you get a couple injuries on the O-line, and that team looks very, very gettable. And I think this is why I've always been hesitant to prop up Herbert into the category of these other top quarterbacks, right? Because here's what I'll say. I've seen Mahomes with a bad O-line. The worst he's done is the AFC Championship game. Josh Allen, if he doesn't have a great O-line, I trust that he's still going to give me elite quarterback play and probably 11 or 12 wins. Lamar, if he had bad O-line, I trust that he's going to still put up video game numbers. Joe Burrow, I've seen him with a bad offensive line go to the Super Bowl. Herbert loses, again, and I'm not saying it's it's only your O-line, because obviously that's a big thing. But if you want to be considered an elite quarterback in the NFL, you got to be able to win even with a bad O-line. And barely escaping the Dolphins and losing these other games, just, again, it shows the separation, and it shows where he's not at, to me. And again, we'll have to see what it looks like when they start getting those guys back. But again, I think the Chargers with this, it's almost, to me, it looks like with the Chiefs starting to pick up momentum, to me, I kind of foresee the fall of this Chargers team. Now, I probably still make the playoffs, because the AFC, once you get outside of the top few teams, gets really bad. But I think they went from being, a legitimate kind of verge contender to now maybe I could see them winning a game in the playoffs. But again, we'll have to kind of see how that goes. And so the flip side of that, though, Tua and Miami. I think Miami might have a Tua problem. So, obviously, if you haven't heard or didn't see it, Tua gave his post-game interview in which he basically talked about how bad the leadership is in Miami, and how, there's no accountability in the culture, and how, players are showing up late to things like player-only meetings. And so, it's funny, because when as I was listening to him talk in this post-game interview, I'm sitting there like, wow, this is crazy. He's really just going at Mike McDaniel. And then he mentioned the fact that he was like, yeah, players showing up late to players-only meetings and aren't being held accountable. A couple things. I don't know if Tua knows that most of us know this, but head coaches aren't in charge of player-only meetings. That's for the captains of your team. And typically, again, I'm not in the Miami locker room here, but typically what I would say is, in any sport, but particularly football, your highest paid player tends to be one of the leaders on the team, because he's usually the best player. And then when you get to football, quarterback is kind of one of those leadership positions. And so, in what I think Tua was trying to call out Mike McDaniel and the culture and the accountability, indirectly told us all that he's failing as a leader, and that he is the one who's might not be respected by those players. And then to double down on it, an ex-Dolphin player came out and said, my first team meeting that I went to, Tua was late 15 minutes. And so, look, I had my reservations about paying Tua prior to all this, when I thought he was good in his post-game interviews, because, limited arm, everything has to be on time. But this year, I think it's really, really being driven home how bad of a contract this is for Miami. Because not only did you pay a guy who is now calling himself out while attempting to call out his head coach, but is also a guy who has come out and put the blame on everyone else all season. He blamed Tyreek earlier in the year because Tyreek ran too fast. And Tyreek should know that Tua's arm isn't strong enough to get him the ball down the field. That is an actual blame that Tua put on Tyreek this year. So it's, these post game interviews from Tua are starting to become very, very eye opening as far as how bad of a leader he is as well. When I think that was one of the few reasons he got the contract he did was because he was perceived to be this really good leader, as well as being able to throw a great ball as long as it's on time. And so I think the Dolphins are in a serious problem. I think my guess is you probably start to see the fire sale coming soon. Um, I would say, you know, with Tyreek out, I would have assumed he'd be on the move. I would assume Achan's on the move, and probably some pieces on that defense also for sale. And look, man, let's move ahead. Let's go over to the game of the week, man. The one we were all looking forward to: Chiefs and Lions, and Chiefs put it on them, 30-17. Um, Look, we'll get to the extracurriculars here in a minute, but here's what I'll say: is that game, it gave me kind of, how do I say this? I think the Lions in week one, everyone was in panic mode, like, oh my gosh, this, they lost the coordinators. They don't look the same. This isn't good. And then, they came out and started looking like the Lions again. I think this loss, because it wasn't oh, they're not being creative, or, oh, like they just didn't score, whatever it was. This one seemed different because it seemed like the Chiefs came out and bullied them the way the Lions typically bully people, but in a true like bully fashion. Is, if you ever, I don't know if when y'all grew up, whatever it is. When I was growing up, thankfully I was never really bullied, but my dad had always told me, yeah, bullies will bully people until they get punched in the nose. Then they go to bully somebody else. And that's what it looked like with Detroit this week. Is they like that, they came in bullying all these teams, and they're this big physical, tough, bully of an NFL team. And the Chiefs came in and punched them in the mouth and bullied them, and they did not like it. And so they went off and ran and, went to go find somebody else to bully, or, you get the analogy. And so, and I think that then leads us into what led to the extracurriculars. But here's what I will say, man. I think the Lions will be fine. But it does make me view them in a different light now, as far as I think if you're a team who can get physical with them, the Lions have now shown that they are a mentally weaker team and can be flustered, which then can lead them to poor showings, especially if you can jump out on the lead. And I can't remember the announcer, but he even said it. He's like, "Look, this team is very different when they're not playing from ahead." And again, just to kind of go with that bully analogy, it's easy to play football when you and let those running backs loose when you bully a team and take a big lead, and then you can run all your trick plays and all that. But playing from behind, playing from behind, and playing a team that punches you in the mouth, again, it you could see them start to kind of unravel through the game, and then especially at the end. Next, what I'll say, couple things, because if you've been on Twitter this last week, it's back to everything's rigged for the Chiefs. So here's what I'll say: one, on the play by Detroit that Goff caught the pass, scored a touchdown, and then after the game said, "Yeah, I didn't know they must have changed the rules, or we didn't know that rule, blah blah blah." Again, here's my thing. I would almost be like, yeah, okay, maybe you weren't sure, maybe they did change something, but Tony Dungy said that he watched them run that in practice, and he said, "Oh, that's definitely not legal." unless they've changed the rules since I was coaching. So apparently, this was a very known thing. The Chiefs were very aware of it. Tony Dungy was aware of it. And so, again, maybe the flag didn't come out when everybody would have liked to, but it was the correct call. Next, the safeties from the Lions. So 2 safeties, Branch and can't remember the other guy's name. My bad. But again, just kind of going back to that kind of bullies getting bullied and unraveling. You have one guy go on a Twitter rant talking about the refs after the game. The other guy punched Juju in the face and after the game. And he got his 1-game suspension, which is now against a game we're going to talk about later against the Bucs, where that all of a sudden becomes a really big game for you now. And so I think, one, I don't care what happens in the game. You don't come up and punch a guy after the game when he's going to give you a handshake. And everybody wants to say, oh, no, it wasn't a sucker punch. He stood on business. Juju's holding his hand up for a handshake. What you are saying is if you go up to somebody to shake their hand and they punch you in the face, it means they stood on business. It wasn't a cheap shot. It is. And again, it shows, one, just a lack of maturity on the Lions' part, and 2, it shows what I said. Like I said, they seem to be a mentally weaker team than they have been previously, which then makes me kind of question where I got to put them in the contender status as well. From the Chiefs' point of view, man, though, look, they're looking very back. Get Rashee Rice back this week. And so now, again, we talked about it a few weeks ago with Worthy out where, Hollywood, it was essentially, Hollywood and Tyquan Thornton and Juju, depending on which one you want to do that day. They were, one of those guys was your number 1 receiver. Now, at best, one of those guys is your number 3. Yeah, so because, you'll have Rashee Rice working down low, and then intermediate, you're going to have Xavier taking the top off. You have Kelsey, Hollywood, Juju. So what the Chiefs had when Worthy was out, Rashee was out, and the offense wasn't looking great, and everyone was panicking, saying, oh my gosh, they might be done. Now it looks like they might be back to a 30-plus a game team with the defense playing better. And again, just looking like they're on a crash course for the Super Bowl again. Next, man, we're going to go to a team that I think a lot of people think might be in their way to get to the Super Bowl, and that is the Bills. So, look, Bills lose to Atlanta. And to me, this between the Atlanta game and the New England game, this is starting to sound some bells where I think a lot of us were a year early on as far as the Bills being a team that is not good, but if Josh Allen is putting the cape on, they'll get wins. And he did it last year, but I think this year even more so. That defense looks really bad right now. Not Ravens bad, but really bad. And, he started turning the ball over more, which I would guess is because when your defense is playing bad and teams are scoring, it means you can't hand the ball off as much. And we've seen that Josh Allen has gotten better as far as taking care of the ball when the offense has run less through him and more so James Cook running the ball and letting him cook, and then Josh making a few great plays throughout the game to get them the wins. Can't sit there and rely on James Cook as much when your defense is giving up a lot of points. And I think, they have Shakir again. Coleman looks like he has not quite taken that leap that I thought he was going to take coming into this year. And so it's, again, you might need to see them try to make some moves around the deadline. I don't know what their cap situation looks like. I don't know what they really have to give, but they're a team that I think it wouldn't shock me where a few weeks ago it was, I think everybody's kind of locking them into the 1 seed. I don't think that's a guarantee anymore. And I think we're going to probably see a few more losses from them that we're kind of scratching our head like, wait, are the Bills really contenders? And so, yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to kind of see how that goes moving forward. But to me, right now, I I can't view the Bills as contenders just because there's so many holes in that team that they're asking Josh Allen to cover by being Superman. And to me, just that's not a way you can consistently win, especially playoff football. So, like, that wraps up week 6, man. We're going to come in here to week 7, give you the look ahead on that, give you our top 5. And then, like I said, we got a new little section at the end of the podcast just because it's something I've started getting into lately. So, anyways, coming in, we're going to look ahead. Week 7, we got tonight's game, Steelers Bengals. And I think the question that's going to come out of this one is, are the Steelers true contenders? Because I think this might be a game that's a little closer than a lot of people expect. You know, Steelers, great record coming into the game. I don't think it's quite the Steelers of a few years ago where they were like 10-1, but everyone was like, no chance. I think they're I think they're a better team than that, but it's still hard for me to view them as contenders when, if you watch them play, they give up a lot of yards on defense. They don't take, I mean, everything is very quick out of Rodgers' hand because that offensive line has just not been able to hold up. And I think when you get to some better defenses, and I'm not saying the Bengals are a great defense, but I think when you get to some better defenses, you're going to see them take away those quick throws and force that offensive line to hold up, which I don't think it can. And so in that sense, it's why I'm not going to view them as a legitimate contender. I need to see a lot more from them. I need to see a lot more from Aaron Rodgers, and I need to see a lot more from that defense. But this is a game, again, because you get Joe Flacco in there, who I think is 500 against Tomlin in his career, seen him a lot, like over 20 games against him. You get a guy like that who we've seen can go on a tear with guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and the weapons they have. Now, granted, defense is probably going to give up some points to the Steelers, but I think the Bengals are going to be able to put up some points against the Steelers defense. And so to me, I think we're headed for a lot closer of a game than most people think. Next up, man, we got the Rams and the Jags. So this one, man, this is tough because a lot of me wanted to think the Jags are going to win this because of no Puka Nacua. But it's that. So now, don't get me wrong, the Jags defense has been great. The reason I can't believe in them is because I need to see Trevor start to take that leap. And look, he's been fine. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been bad. He's been fine. But I think that even without Puka, Sean McVay with a week knowing he's not going to have Puka is still going to be able to put up some points. Matt Stafford playing at, having one of the best seasons he's had, playing at peak, not quite like in his prime peak, but a peak Matt Stafford right now. You still have Devontae, you still have Kyron Williams. I think McVay is going to put together an offense that can go out and get a win. And I think Stafford takes care of the ball, doesn't let that Jags defense, thrive on what they've been thriving on all year, which is turnovers. And so to me, this game is really just going to come down to which quarterback can make the plays that won't lose them the game and can win them the game. And I just can't trust Trevor because he's shown he's a quarterback who's going to tend to make those plays that lose him the game, that lose his team the game, as opposed to making the plays that will help his team win the game. So for that, I'm going Rams in this one. Next, man, Eagles, Vikings. Look, we talked about a lot of the Eagles struggles. This one, to me, it's a must win for the Eagles. If you can't go out in what what should feel right now as a desperate team, you can't go out as a desperate team against a team with their backup quarterback, a guy who you let go of a few years ago. You cannot let that team win. You're as desperate as you can be. 2 straight losses, bad losses. You've had a lot of bad games all year. Everything is lining up for the Eagles should go out and should dominate. Like, that's the attitude they should have. However, with this team, you just don't know. And that's the scary part with it, is everything points to the fact that they should be backs against the wall, desperate, come out with intense, ready to go. And I just don't know if they're going to. I'd like to think they are. But again, it's a game. I think this is the game, if you lose, those where I said it's not sirens, but it's there, you got to kind of start raising some flags for it being a problem. You lose this game against a backup quarterback, against a defense that hasn't quite looked as good as we thought it was going to be and how it did earlier in the year. You lose this game when you have all the incentive in the world to win and go out and play a great game. What that will tell me is the Eagles do not have the ability to go out and play a great game. And they are what they've shown us all year. And last game of the week we're going to touch on is the Bucks and Lions, man. Again, so Lions dealing with probably two straight weeks of being the game of the week, and man, Baker and the Bucks coming down. Mike Evans might play, is what the reports are. Look, if Mike Evans plays, that secondary is banged up as it's been, and missing its safety that got suspended for the punch. A game where I think the Lions almost have to win to kind of get momentum back becomes that much harder. And you're playing again against a guy who has just been absolutely phenomenal and who has been shredding up good defenses and good secondaries. Everything in me wanted to say this is a letdown spot for the Bucks, but with that secondary and losing the safety, I think the Bucks come in. I mean, Noah Book, obviously, if it weren't for the fact that Mike Evans might play, and if Mike Evans doesn't play, I would probably lean Lions in this. But if he plays, then I think this is a game the Lions lose again. And I think it starts getting a little uncomfortable in Detroit. All right, y'all. And so here we go. That was the last one for, games of the week. We are going to now move into the top 5. And so for the top 5 this week, man. Now, look, I know some of y'all going to hear this and say, how do you have this team here? Because, their record is this, blah, blah, blah. Truth is this is, I'm looking at teams right now who look the best in all phases. And the team that looks the best in all phases right now, healthy, quarterback, weapons, defense, just down the line, I'm going with the Chiefs at number 1. Again, I think, back to scoring. Rashee Rice coming back now gives them, an incredible intermediate threat. Xavier and Hollywood taking the top off, Tyquan taking the top off, Juju, if they need to throw him in there, another guy who can work that intermediate. Kelsey has looked a lot better. Only thing that worries me about them is the run game right now. And so I think, as they get these pieces back, I think that opens up more in the run game. So we'll have to see if Pacheco can, capitalize on that. If not, I would think you probably see the Chiefs get in the running back market. I would think a guy like Achane in Miami, would be kind of their ideal. A secondary one, maybe a Kamara from New Orleans. It seems like they're kind of starting to ramp him down some. But I think again, I think they're a running back away from being the most, just complete in every level. The offensive line looks good, D line looks good, secondary looks good, weapons look good. Quarterback is obviously the best in the league. So with that, that's why I take the Chiefs at 1. 2 are the Bucks, man. And look, Bucks and Chiefs, I was going back and forth on 1 and 2. The Bucks, to me, just the amount of injuries they have right now, it's just tough for me to put them at 1. I think, like I said, I mean, we'll see if Mike Evans plays tonight. I think this is a losable game for him. And I know Baker's been playing incredible. Like I said, he's the MVP of the league right now. But I just think with the injuries to the O-line and the fact that, man, like last week was the first week it wasn't a heroic game to get it out, to pull it out. Now, look, winning is a skill, and I give the Bucks and Baker all the credit in the world, but there's been some teams in there that they probably shouldn't have had to take them to the wire that did. 3 man, we're going Rams. I like the Rams, man. I think, obviously the Puka injury hurts them, but head coach, one of the best in the league. Stafford playing at an MVP level. That defense is young and it's great pass rush. Kyron Williams, solid running back. And so with them, I think, again, really, really good team. 4, I have the Lions. So for all the unraveling that I said they're doing, look, I still think they're one of the best teams in the league. Obviously, best running back duo in the league. Amon-Ra, still one of the best wide receivers in the league. Goff, when he's on and he has a clean pocket, or when you blitz him, he cleans up. And look, for as bad as their secondary is, they get pressure on the quarterback at least. They get pressure on the quarterback at least. And so for that, I have them at number 4. And number 5 is tough, man, because it's 2 teams. I went back and forth between 2 teams that, to me, have just such clear problems. And it's funny because one team, I'm like, I just believe in the quarterback. And the other team, I just believe in the talent. It's back and forth between the Eagles and Buffalo. And what I'm going to do here at 5, I'm going to put the Eagles. I think just the talent alone is enough to win games. And while Buffalo, Josh Allen is extremely talented, the Eagles just have talents in so many places that I feel like if you don't get it together, it's just such a colossal failure. Whereas if the Bills had a down year, I could understand it. If the Eagles have a down year, it's just an unmitigated disaster. All right, man. And lastly, look, like I said, we got a new segment here, and so we're calling this B's Best Bets. So, look, this year, my first year getting into NFL betting. And so, all these guys, they got their bets, they give their 5. And so we're going to get into this. We're going to see how we can do. All right. And so, look, what I will say, every bet I give you, I am going to bet. So if we lose in money together. If we win in money together. And so, look, 5 bets. First, we have Atlanta +2. Atlanta going to, oh man, hold on. I got to look this up again. Oh, going to the 49ers. So here's my thing. 49ers extremely banged up. Fred Warner out. Obviously, Joey Bosa out. We'll see if Purdy plays. Maybe, maybe not. If he doesn't play, Mac Jones is hampered. Jawan Jennings been questionable. I don't think he practiced this week. And so while, I think tough for the Falcons going across country to play the Niners, I just think they're a younger team, healthier team, and I can't see the Niners. I just can't see them winning the game, to be honest. So with that, we're going to take Atlanta +2. Next up, man, in our underrated watch of the week. I don't know if we could consider it underrated because it's a rivalry game, interdivision, but Commanders and Cowboys, and I got the Commanders -1.5. Look, I think this is just a situation where Dan Campbell, former Cowboys DC, so practice against Dak for a lot of practices. I think he comes out with a defense that can somewhat slow up that Dallas offense. And the Dallas defense is so bad that I think this is going to be a big time offensive game from Washington, from Jaden, and from Bill Jacory. Whichever one we say, Bill, I think he's going to have a big game this week as well. So with that, we're taking Washington -1.5. Next, man, look, we got Indy +1.5 at the Chargers. So this is a game. Look, I have wanted to not believe in the Colts all year because one, I've made way too many jokes and I have too much equity in the fact that I've called Daniel Jones a tight end playing quarterback for the last I don't even know how many years. Shout out to Bob for that. Yeah, I don't want them to be good. However, the Chargers have not shown me any reason over the last couple of weeks that I should believe in them. And I think this Indianapolis team, while I still don't believe in the quarterback, is really good everywhere else. And so with that, we're going to take Indy +1.5. Next, man, look, we are going tonight. Cincy +5.5 in Pittsburgh. I think this is just a game. Like I said, I think there is a chance that Cincy's offense with Joe Flacco and those weapons can get going against that Pittsburgh defense. And I just don't think the Pittsburgh defense is able, or the Pittsburgh offense is able to blow anybody out. So I think 5.5. Look, I get a field goal game, I win it, and so to me, I think Cincy at least keeps it close enough that 5.5 covers. And lastly, look, this last one was hard for me because there wasn't a ton of bets I liked. The one I like the most is going with desperation, and so I got Philly -1.5 against the Vikings. Again, I just think you're talking about a team with so much talent that is in just such a bad need of a win that I think they come out and they put it on the Vikings and Carson wins. And so look, again, we'll go Atlanta +2, Washington -1.5, Indy +1.5, Cincy +5.5, and Philly -1.5. All that's through William Hill, man. But that's all we got today, man. So look, I appreciate y'all as always. Look, like, subscribe, comment, interact with us on the podcast, on our social media. Let's be real, man. And look, cheers. We'll see y'all next time.